Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinars on tips for writing an effective abstract, which is a webinar regarding our AHRMM21 call for presentations. So my name is Melissa Morrison, and I am the education specialist here at AHRMM, and I plan the education for our annual conference along with the annual conference education committee. So today we're going to discuss the requirements to submit an abstract for AHRMM21 and include some best practices and tips for writing your abstract. So a few housekeeping notes before we begin. I have placed all lines on a listen-only mode, but you may ask questions by typing them in the Q&A box. The Q&A box can be found on the right-hand side of the WebEx browser, clicking the ellipses, and then there's a little Q&A box there, and it'll pop up on your side. We will hold our questions to the end, and we'll do a little Q&A at the end of today's webinar. I'm joined today by two members of the Annual Conference Education Committee, Karen Moreland and Sam Leach. Karen is the Vice President of Supply Chain Operations at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, and she's also the chair of the committee this year. And Sam is the Manager of Enterprise Implementation at Inalair. And the conference committee reviews all of our abstracts, and they are the ones who build the schedule for our conference. So I'm really excited to have both Sam and Karen with us today. They have been on the committee for several years and have lots of insight as to what makes a great abstract and how you could get selected. So Karen, do you want to say a few words?
Yes, thank you, Melissa. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Sam and I will be sharing with you some tips for writing your abstract. We have the pleasure of being on the Annual Conference Education Committee, and we, along with our other committee members, as Melissa mentioned, are responsible for picking the abstracts that will then be presented at the annual conference. So we'd like to share with you what we're looking for in as you submit your abstracts, so that when it comes to being reviewed by our committee, you have submitted the best abstract that you can, and we review, and hopefully you'll be selected to present at the annual conference. So thank you again for joining, and Melissa, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thanks. So to start today, we're just going to cover the basics of what is required for the submission. First, a title. And I do want to emphasize something, that to really think about a title that's going to draw a member of someone who's attending to your session. So this is also the first thing that a reviewer is going to read. And try to make it as compelling as you can be. You don't really have to try for, sometimes they can be a little bit too cheeky or trying to be clever. Don't feel like you need to do that. Just feel like it's very clear and just make sense to what you are presenting. And then the most important piece of the submission is your abstract description. And these questions here are the questions that you want to address in your presentation, in your description. And just making it as clear as possible and including all of the steps that you will go through, not just, glancing over something that you did great, we're glad you were successful at a program, but how did you really resolve it? An example of an abstract, you will cover the problem, the purpose, the method, the result, and the conclusion. And one thing that's really important that I have in red down here is to really make sure it's not a sales pitch, that even if you have this product that was great, you really have to think about how can anybody use this. It can't just be somebody who's going to use a certain product, but how can anybody find this session to be really helpful. And also not to include any organization name. The abstract description is blinded so that there's just no issues with somebody reviewing it, maybe knowing this organization or that. So it's just a blinded abstract description. The abstract description is just for the committee to read and review. It does not get shared with attendees or anything like that. And then another part is that for a really successful presentation, we do require that you have a provider co-speaker. This is just not This is because that we really feel that presentations are much more successful when you have that champion next to you, that person in the hospital who was really able to implement something and found it to be really successful. And then I also include my spell check button there because people often will be just, if there's just like a little bit of issue with a spelling, it's just like a doc down for the committee. So there isn't a spell check feature in the form when you're submitting an abstract, so just making sure you put that in a Word document, do give it a quick spell check. The rest of the requirements here are outlined. Learning outcomes, this is really important. I think some people might overlook this, but this is what the learner is going to know at the end of your session. What action items? We do have a list of action items when you're doing the submission, when you look on our website, and you can select these words, select these action words. They're really helpful to know. You just don't want to say like, I'm going to do an overview of this, but like that person is going to be able to do this in their own facility. The session description, this is where you really want to shine. This is your marketing description. It's not necessarily used in the abstract review portion, but this is where you're going to draw people into your session. So this does not have to be blinded in the marketing description. So feel free to do anything that's going to make people come to your session and make this really clean and polished so that it's something that if your session is accepted, it'll go on AHRMM's website and promote your presentation and include in our conference mobile app, everything like that. Career level and knowledge level, these two are to specify who your audience is. And I was just talking to Karen and Sam before this call about you want it to be specific. You don't want it to have really broad, but if you have a specific audience, even if other people are not in that specific audience, it is important to know who you're talking to, who you're directing it to. It helps people know if they should attend your session. So the career level is outlined as staff, manager, director, and executive. And the knowledge level is introductory, intermediate, and advanced. And when we build the schedule, we will look to have a variety of each of those levels in the session. So it's not just a lot of executive education, it's not a lot of entry staff education, it's a mix of all. The audience interaction description, this is the newest part of our submission requirements. And the reason we added it was because we wanted to get you to start thinking about how you can have a really interactive presentation. The days are gone of just a lecture for 60 minutes, you have a little bit of Q&A, but this is to get the audience to be more involved in the presentation. It doesn't have to be a whole focus, but it will get you thinking about it. It gets the community knowing, oh, you're going to have a great interactive session. We offer polling options, polling questions, maybe small group discussions, Q&A, things like that. We have some examples online as well. And then finally is the takeaway tool description. And the takeaway tool is what AHRMM attendees are looking for. We get a comment every single year what could we provide you more with? And then the attendees always say more tools, more lists of what to do. It just enhances the learning. It keeps people, when they go home and go back, they can look at what their tools that they have and downloaded and be able to take those learning outcomes that you developed and implement them. So some examples of this can be a spreadsheet, just even a summary of your session, a checklist of how to, and the committee does review these to ensure that you have a great tool that goes along with your presentation. So Sam, do you want to add anything to this slide?
Yeah, so as a committee member, I just want to speak from that perspective to those who are participating today, but we really do, I guess, encourage you to follow exactly as things have been explained. It's very helpful for us if you're accurate on who you're targeting in terms of the career level and the knowledge level. And those can vary, but it does help us to at least have a guided approach when we're reading an abstract and considering aspects of it. And anyway, anything you can do there to be accurate is very helpful. And then with regard to that takeaway, that's like a final thing that we'll be when we review an abstract. if you're solid on your takeaway, that's a great ending point. We want something like that because, as Melissa's mentioned, that's what attendees of the conference look for. They want something meaningful or useful, and it's as part of your abstract, that's a last way for you to come in and say, here's a great abstract. Don't skip the abstract or the takeaway part. You want to make sure it's solid and something that can be used by anyone who's attending your particular presentation. So I think that kind of covers it, but just use this as a guide. It's very helpful for us as committee members to consider your abstract. That's all, Melissa.
Thank you. I will cover briefly the submission formats, the session formats that we have outlined here. You can find all the details online, but the one thing to point out is that all of them are 60-minute presentation with the exceptions of the poster session, the AHRMM talks, and the workshops. Posters are not necessarily a formal presentation that you will give, but it's all about the design of that poster. And then included with that would be a discussion point that you would have with attendees as they come by the poster. So, for example, for poster sessions, you wouldn't really have a audience interaction with that. I think that's outlined in the form as well. And then the AHRMM talks are 15-minute presentations. These are like TED Talks, just quick points. These are really great for new speakers, like if you've never presented before, but you have a great little topic that you want to get out there. They're really engaging. There's a lot. It's a short, different new format, and then the attendees will see a few topics in 1 hour as opposed to just the 1 hour presentation. And the workshops, these will be new for 2021, and it's more interactive, a lot more hands-on, and we will offer those as a 60-minute presentation or a 120-minute, so a 2-hour workshop. So if there's like a great project that you've been working on and you want to bring a group of people together to really work towards this project with some outcomes, this is a great example. I guess I'll just hit on roundtable as well. This is a good discussion point. You can present on a little bit, like you can do about a 10-minute presentation and then just workshop the rest of the time. So it's slightly different than a workshop, but it's also similar as well. Next, we do have new tracks this year, similar to our old tracks, but we've sort of lumped a few together and revised them. You can see them listed here. We have detailed descriptions on our website for what falls exactly into these tracks. But we really felt that we could have a more condensed track and get some more specific things that we're looking for. If you have any questions about a topic that you're working on and you read the descriptions of the tracks and you just don't know exactly which track to put it in, please feel free to reach out and I will be happy to help you put it in there. But we do have a detailed description on our website of all of these tracks. Finally, for this year, since it is 2021 and we don't know what's going to happen, even though we're having great vaccine rollouts for COVID-19, we are leaving it open to if you can present live in person or if you'll be able to present virtually. There's just one question in the form that just asks you to think about it. If you know right now that you're only going to be able to present virtually, say that. If you think you'll be able to present live, but maybe things will change, just select it. And this is just to help us with our planning for the event. And we just really want to make sure that if you have a great presentation, but you can't travel this year, know that you are going to be able to present it in a virtual format. So we welcome everyone to submit this year. So finally, moving on to the tips portion from our committee members. So I will turn the presentation over to Sam and Karen.
Thanks, Melissa. So I think some of these things we might always assume you should be professional, but I wanted to point a few things out here in terms of submitting your abstract. Use some of the resources you have available to you in terms of other people to get another set of eyes, just to make sure that something you have looked at repeatedly and has escaped your attention doesn't escape from someone else reviewing it. They can be a great resource in terms of the proofreading, as you want this to look as professional as possible. And then always take special care to avoid having any type of a sales pitch in your presentation. That's a real turnoff for the committee members, if I can put it that way. No one wants to hear a sales pitch. We want it to be professional. So another point here, moving on to the second bullet here, is one way to really provide some credibility to your presentation if you're not from a provider facility is to partner with one. I think that is something that we zero in on every time if it's not a provider. Do you have someone from a provider perspective to add or lend any type of credibility to your presentation? Be very thorough in following the outline. The way it's set up is in terms of all of the features that should be included in the abstract. You want to make sure you address every one of those. And then with regard to takeaways, I know we've already mentioned this a couple of times, but it's a very important aspect of your abstract. Describe what you're going to provide the attendees. What will they use after everything's said and done? How will they benefit, or what can they use that's tangible at the end of the presentation? It's expected, and any clarity you can provide in your abstract as to what you will use for a takeaway will only enhance your abstract. Finally, you'll avoid, I think that's been mentioned too, but just avoid stating your organization, or if there's a product mentioned in the abstract, you don't want to include that. Or, I mean, if you're referring to something, you want to avoid mentioning whatever specifics about that product is. And then finally, as members of the committee, we want to be a resource. The only thing I can say at this point is use the formula that was mentioned back on the earlier slide. I think it's slide 2. And there's also content in terms of crafting your abstract available on the AHRMM website under the annual conference section. And I think the PowerPoint from today's meeting will also be shared after we convene. But with that, I don't know that there's much else to add. Karen, you may have some additional words of wisdom to submit. I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Sam. As mentioned previously, and I know it may sound like a broken record, but that title and description of your abstract is very crucial. And I would put yourself in a situation where you're at a conference and you're looking at the list of classes or classes to attend, and you're looking down the list. You want to be that one that catches the audience's attention, and they really want to attend that so they can learn, and use those takeaways to take back to their organization and share. Our committee is very focused on getting good information, sharing stories that people can take back to their organizations. Not everyone from an organization can attend the conference, and so getting those takeaways, getting a catchy title, I think is very important. And also, over the years, we have taken the comments back, the feedback from conferences, and added things, as Melissa mentioned, like the AHRMM talk or the roundtable. So if you have something to share and you don't believe it's going to take up a whole 60-minute session, then I would suggest putting in for an AHRMM talk, something that you can quickly share with people, 15, 20-minute session that really might boost someone's education or their morale in the context of our organization, and then, again, take that back to people at their organization. So, Melissa, I'm not quite sure how you'd like to wrap this up, but I feel like from this webinar we've got interest in people submitting abstracts, and we want everyone to be successful. We know there's a lot of great ideas out there and experiences that we really do need to share with the rest of our members. And this is the way we can get it done through our annual conference.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really great. Karen, you're right. We want the best information and best practices shared out there. So we'll end today. We have 10 minutes for Q&A, and then we do have questions that have come in. So the first question is, how do you feel about submitting an abstract on a subject, in our case, a case study that we have already presented on at a past AHRMM conference? I can speak to that. I think we have seen that in the past. We'll get abstracts that, or a submission that's similar to something that was done in the past. And as long as you have new relevant updates, we'll welcome it. If it's exactly the same, we would not accept it if it's something that's been presented. So if it's something new and updated, yes. I mean, even if you will cover some of what you initially covered, but there's just been like great updates. I mean, this past year, lots have changed. Sam and Karen, any insight to that for you?
I think those are the key points. We're looking for something new that would add relevancy to a current presentation versus relying on something that's already been done before.
I agree. Thank you.
Okay, the next question is about the knowledge levels. If we have guidelines specifically around them, for instance, so I'll say no, we don't have any guidelines. For me, the reason we added knowledge level is because staff level or career level doesn't necessarily mean knowledge level. And so it's more on what, like how would you rate your presentation? Like, is it going to be over basic information or something more advanced? So for instance, somebody may be working in logistics, but they really have no, and they're a manager level or something like that, but they have no knowledge of, these are really horrible examples, I apologize, of value analysis. So they're at the manager level, but really they're going to go to an introductory course on a different type of topic, potentially. So that's why that's there, but I can definitely get a little bit more information on our website about that. Is that pretty much how you guys see it, Sam or Karen?
Yeah, I think maybe just one other thing to mention is we get different types of attendees from those that have come multiple times, some that are new in the industry, some are new to their role. So that introductory or intermediate or advanced in terms of the level that someone's at, not necessarily their career, but in their position. So, I mean, is there a bunch of content in your presentation that's expected that they would already know? It's assumed that they would know that, and it's probably going to be advanced. But you don't. If you have something to offer someone that's new in a role, I would say absolutely submit that as an introductory level. But anyway, I don't know if you had anything else to add, Karen.
No, I think we use that as a guide to help people decide what session they go to, but it's not any type of a rule that you can only go to these sessions. So I think it's just used as a guide to allow people to make the selection when they go into a seminar.
Thanks. And then a question around roundtables. Can you describe more about creating a roundtable? Do you have to line up several leaders, panelists, or just submit a topic? You don't have to. Roundtables, we used to have them as just something that the committee developed, but last year, which now it'll be this year, we will be allowing submissions for them. And the reason is you might have a great topic that you want to have a discussion around that's not a lecture, but it's not something that our committee is going to think of. So one of the requirements for submitting is that to have a list of questions that you will address with the group of attendees. And actually, I didn't mention this before, but Roundtable, it is a limited group of attendees. You aren't going to have a large room of people there that you're speaking to, but it will be grouped. You'll be in specific, there'll be tables in the room so you can break out into groups. And sometimes it's just one person leading it, and sometimes it's multiple people leading it. It's just up to you. So if you have a specific item or anything like that, or a question about a topic, feel free to email it to us and we can get that addressed. I think I've said enough about that, but Sam or Karen, anything to add about Roundtable?
No, I think you've said it. However you feel more comfortable presenting, whether in a panel or if you're comfortable enough to do it on your own, whatever format is best for your presentation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's true.
And then we have one final question. So if you, we have more time, so if you have any more questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. That's the bottom right side of your screen. So the question is, how do we know if a presentation will qualify for contact hours of continuing education? And all of our, anything that's accepted by the committee is going to qualify for contact hours. So nothing that is on the agenda that's part of the call for presentations would not qualify. You would not get accepted if you didn't qualify for continuing education hours. So that's all I have. Oh, yeah. What are some of AHRMM's decision criteria, disease prevalence, for having a large conference versus virtual one? When is your decision date? Okay. We are currently working with the CDC and monitoring everything. We're also working specifically with the city of Boston and the convention center and all the hotels in the area on, what are their guidelines. We don't have a specific decision date, but more information will be posted when we know more. It's just a constantly evolving situation. So we'll keep you posted. Like I said before, we will, even if we don't have a live conference, or even if it's much, much smaller than something we would normally have, you will be able to present virtually. So just keep an eye out on AHRMM's website, and when we have more information, I would say we'd know more towards the end of March, beginning of April, with more details than I have right now. I think I got all of the questions. Any final comments? I know, Karen, you kind of already wrapped.
Melissa, since that question was asked about the virtual, I do just want to let everyone know, if you weren't able to attend virtually last year, we actually received some very high compliments on a virtual conference. We also experienced that people felt more comfortable in asking questions, perhaps maybe because you weren't in front of a crowd. You could type those questions in the chat box, and then those questions were also, questions and answers were recorded and I believe the speakers were answering the questions even after the session. So even though you may think that a virtual conference you're not getting to the audience, you're actually getting to more people. So I will be honest, I was a little skeptical with going virtual last year, but it really turned out to be a very educational conference that I think people had high participation in. So I just wanted to add that about virtual. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So with that, I want to thank Karen and Sam for being with us today, and for all of you for joining us today. We will have this recorded on our website in case you want to direct this recording to anybody or review it. If you have any questions, especially if you have anything specific about your presentation or your abstract, feel free to email me directly. My email's on the screen right now. And then Just don't forget to submit by the February 5th deadline, and have a really great day. Enjoy.